Good morning and welcome to the second in the series of This Can Happen webinars. So a huge thanks to our partners and our friends for helping us put this together and all the other webinars. So you probably hopefully will have seen an email which you should have got this morning. Unfortunately, David Beanie has been taken ill overnight with coronavirus. This session will be rescheduled and we will let you know when it will be rescheduled and when you can listen in ASAP. Obviously, we wish him a really speedy recovery and thank you very much for bearing with us. However, I am delighted to introduce you today to Laura Fox, who will be giving her webinar on top tips for optimizing home working. Laura and I have worked together a lot, and I can tell you she's a fabulous speaker. You're gonna you won't be disappointed, and it will be a great session. So, I should say my name's Susie, sorry, and I'll be facilitating this webinar today. So Laura will speak to you for about 50 minutes and you'll be able to follow along on your screen. We will be sending you the slides and a recording of the session afterwards via email. So don't worry if you if you have to leave or you have children around or whatever, because we've all got distractions at the moment. You can ask a question at any time during the session. All you need to do is type it into the question box on the right-hand side of your screen. Questions are totally anonymous and come only to me, so please do feel free to contribute in complete confidence. I will then read out the questions. So Laura and I would love you to be as interactive as possible. Laura was going to ask you some questions, so please do put the answers into the answer box. Ask anything. I'll either interrupt her and ask it as she goes through, or we'll do the questions at the end. But the more that you can get involved in this, the better. Okay, so I think that's about it. You'll find on these slides, the penultimate slides, there are some sort of some links and places to go for mental health. So if that's helpful to you, do look out for that. And now that's enough from me. It gives me great pleasure to hand you over to our guest speaker today, Laura Fox.
Thank you, Susie, and hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining this Change in Agenda webinar. These are really unprecedented times, and for most of us, working in a completely new way. And we do wish the best to David, and we hope that he recovers quickly. If you have started working from home, you might be adapting to the change of environment and the loss of routines and these new ways of working. And for other people, you might feel that you're struggling already. Working from home 1 day a week or for a short period of time is one thing, but working from home for a few months or more or not knowing is something very different altogether. Now, we don't know how long this is going on for, and then we have done this presentation to a number of different audiences over the last couple of weeks, and I think what's coming through very strongly is the anxiety that people are feeling about the uncertainty of not knowing how long this will go on for, and we are all in this together. So if you need help to figure out how to make working from home actually work for you, I hope we can provide some constructive solutions on today's call. So by way of introduction, I'm Laura Fox. I've worked in the corporate sector my entire career, partnering with large multinationals, UK-based businesses, and more recently SMEs and private individuals, helping them to navigate their careers using tools like LinkedIn. I actually worked for LinkedIn for 7 years as one of the first hires in the London office. And as we used to say back then, it was really a case of building the plane while it was flying. So there was a lot to do. I initially worked in a global role, then in a EMEA role, and after I had my first child, I opted for a UK role. So there was a lot of travel, a lot of working with virtual teams, and a lot of remote working. And then I set up my own business middle of 2018, actually whilst I was living in Asia, in Thailand. And I was helping people leverage LinkedIn better and pursue their career next play. And for many people I've worked with, this often means turning their back on the city and traveling into town and working from home. So I've got it wrong myself. I've iterated, I've learned tons from other people, and now I feel like I've nailed it. There are tons of resources out there right now. When people are switching to this new working from home, you couldn't go online without falling over, particularly on platforms like LinkedIn, various different blogs and articles and links and trainings about working from home. And so, I found that quite overwhelming and a bit like, wading through treacle. So what we've tried to do is curate some of these ideas with my own experiences and address some of these challenges head on. What are we going to cover in today's call? A range of things. The importance of having daily rituals, like we do when we go to an office, is a great way to set ourselves up for a productive day. So we'll look at those with how you get great energy and positive outcomes at the end of the day. How to maintain focus while working remotely. We'll look at lots of practical tips and talk about time management. And for many people, this can be one of the biggest pitfalls. They say that time is not your most precious resource, your attention is. So we can talk about how we can help you manage your attention and focus. We'll talk about how to avoid those feelings of social isolation that home workers experience, particularly if you're living on your own, and how to switch off also at the end of the day. Having spent a lot of time with a personal nutritionist, I will share a range of practical tips for you to maintain a healthy body and a healthy mind, which can be really challenging when you're confined at home with only, one walk or run per day. We're only allowed out for the essentials. And I've been fully isolating for about 3 weeks now because I've got a 2-year-old who has an underlying chronic condition. So she is immunosuppressed. So we've been at home for weeks and weeks and weeks. And so we'll talk about the importance of moving and mindfulness and your meals. And also I'll share with you a little bit about my experience of working from home with children. So as I mentioned, I've got one that's 2 and another one that's 4. I also have a dog, and all of these different things in my life, they need our attention and energy. And even if you're living on your own, there's always things, whether it's an elderly parent or somebody that that needs you during this time. We can talk about how do you avoid those distractions. So a couple of caveats, and I'm sure you're all very open to this. We are not going to talk about tech. I know many of you are working in corporate environments as well, and every company is different in terms of the different tools that they're using and the comms channels that they're using. And so what we want to do is really focus on you and your environment and how you transition, and not all of those great sort of tools that you can use, because it's different for everybody. Okay, so what I think I'd like to do right now is, because this is a change to the original agenda of what you were looking at, is maybe just ask a question. And I would love for you to put your answers in the chat box, and then Susie will just start to have a look at these and get a feel for what some of the answers coming in, because I want to understand. We've got 360 people on this call, and it would be lovely for me to know if we can get a sense of it. What's your starting point when it comes to working from home? So are you completely new to this? You're not sure where to start? You've done a little bit, but you're feeling a bit overwhelmed? You're really confident? Or, you're a super pro, in which case I'll be learning from you. So maybe you could just start to put some of these questions in the chat box. That would be really, really, really helpful. What's your starting point when it comes to working from home? So I'll just...
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go for it, Susie.
I was just going to say that I've had a few comments saying people are struggling to hear. I should have sent everybody if for some reason you can't get through on your computer with obviously our home systems, you can phone in on the number and then use the access code that I've just sent to everyone. So sorry if you're not having problems. Okay, so someone says completely new to working from home, done a little bit, but now a lot more. Work from home 1 day a week. I've been working from home for 12 years, but now there are 3 others in the house.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I've done it for 1 day and it was a disaster. Total new. I work from home 1 day a week anyway, so slightly used to it, but not every day. Oh yeah, so work from home twice a week usually. Overwhelmed, given it seems so endless. Yep.
Yes. Yeah.
People finding it hard to switch off. Minimal experience, and I have a 4 and 2-year-old, so quite a mix here. Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much everyone for contributing though. There's loads of answers. I'm used to it, new to this, so I think we've got a real mix here, Laura.
Yeah, a few things. So as I said before, Susie and I have done these sessions with some other companies over the last couple of weeks, and what was new that just came through just then that I haven't heard before is people talking about, I've been doing this for ages, but actually now I'm doing it with other people in the house, and that's very different. And also just people who, you know, who are really brand new to this. So, you know, that's a huge change. And particularly if you're relatively new to a role, or if you're new to a team, that brings additional challenges, because how do you prove to people that you're doing a great job and, you know, learning everything you need to learn when you're new? So there's so many sides of this conversation. So we'll try and, you know, talk to as many of these different things as we can. So quite helpfully, let's move on. There was a study done at the beginning of this year by Buffer, who are the social media management company, called The State of Remote Work. And it was done in conjunction with several other remote working businesses. And they asked about 3,500 people about their home working practices. And when asked what their biggest struggle was, the top three answers were collaboration and communication, loneliness or isolation, and not being able to switch off. And that's really interesting. I think some people might feel like it's hard achieving everything you need to when you have so many distractions around you. And that is, we'll talk about that. And actually that feeling of connection can have a really big impact on your mental health. You know, particularly right now, we don't know how long this is going to go on for. And there's more pressure on people to continue to deliver, to feel like they're doing a great job, on managers and their teams, but also on individuals to be able to show that they're, you know, what they're doing is great. So, you know, I'm sure that there are probably many people on this call that can relate to some of these things. Having daily rituals when you're working from home is really helpful. Susie, can you move on just one? It's very easy for life to bleed into work and work to bleed into life. So they can become really enmeshed. It's also, you know, those feelings of being disconnected. Even when you're, you know, you're around people, you can still feel that feeling of isolation. So having some patterns of working can be helpful to kickstart the day. And there are some timeless work from home tips, which you may have seen, but we can talk about. So how do you get into work mode? Our brain is designed to get into work mode by sending us signals. And for many of us, it's great that we don't have to do our normal commute into work. You know, we don't have to deal with the rush hour, the train, the cold, the overcrowding. Some people, actually, like me, I used to love that time because I would get a head start on work. I'd listen to a podcast. I'd see other people watching Netflix download. But all these things are sending signals to our brain that the workday is beginning. So we know that we're going into work mode. I strongly recommend having a familiar routine to transition from home mode into work mode. Now, with so much uncertainty in the world right now, control what you can control. Set your alarm, get up at your normal time. For me, my dog is my alarm clock because I'm up at 6:30 every morning to take her out, and that helps me with a structure. And I like to copy the identical routine when I was traveling into central London every day. I get up, I shower, I dress, I have breakfast, I put on some makeup, I get the kids ready for their day. So now I know that I am ready to begin. For you, it might be a Joe Wicks workout and a smoothie. Whatever it is, keep those rituals consistent. And on that point about getting dressed, for me, it's really important that I don't work in my PJs. I've done it before, but there is a definite mental shift from home to work when I get dressed and make myself presentable. Also, sometimes you have those unexpected video calls and you're like, oh my God, I wish I put some lippy on or brushed my hair. So there's no right or wrong here. Some people like to be office from the waist up whilst wearing sweatpants and slippers below. For me, creating a clear line helps me make that mental shift. I've also heard of people, you know, drinking from a separate cup or mug, you know, specifically for their work hours. So small demarcations can help define the day. I'd also suggest, you know, setting a start time for your work. Yeah, it might change every day right now. It does for me. Sometimes my start time is at 1 o'clock. Sometimes it's at 8:30. It really depends. But I like to set a start time the night before. I like to tell people that either I live with, like my husband, or my colleagues that I work with, what that time is that I'm going to be available. And then included in that, I set breaks and I have time for lunch. And we'll talk about that later, because making sure that you break is really, really important. So we're talking about life bleeding into work and work. You can sometimes find yourself logging on and you get engrossed in what you're doing, and suddenly you realise you're sitting there and you haven't moved for 4 hours. It's really important that we break up our day, and having that structure really helps. Another thing that I've learned, which I really like to do, is helping to define what does success look like for the day. So if you imagine when you're in the office, there's something more visible about your level of success. You know, whether there's a line of people waiting to talk to you at your desk, or your phone's ringing off the hook, or you're being called out at a team meeting, or whatever it is, it's very easy to see how your success is visibly defined. And how does that look when you're working from home? Now, how will people know that you're working at your best? Will my boss know that I'm doing really good work, particularly when I'm new? And there's a whole conversation that we can have about how do you help yourself when you're new in a role in this environment. Praise and thanks can be really important for people. And so defining what success looks like in a day, what tasks you're going to complete, what conversations you're going to have, if you're a manager, who you need to thank and who you need to call out, how you're going to share your wins will help you with that sense of achievement. And finally, set those boundaries around timings and then switch off. So decide at what time you're going to finish at the end of the day. Okay, we've all been there in the corporate environment, and things come in, you know, as curveballs, and particularly right now in the environment of COVID-19, there's all sorts of crazy things happening in the world. But if you can, and where you can, say, right, I'm going to finish at 6 o'clock, and then close your laptop, step away, go and do something different, talk to someone, make dinner, do a meditation, but make that decision up front when you're going to finish your day. Remote workers often report that they feel they're on call all of the time, and with the result that many people work way beyond their typical hours. So figure out when you're going to stop and communicate that with your colleagues and your loved ones. And then one of the things that I think it's important to do is think about how you're then going to spend your free time, how you're going to recharge, what are you going to do? And we'll talk about that as well. What are you going to do once you've switched off? That's going to be meaningful and not just scrolling your phone and doing something that's not going to re-energize you. And we'll talk more about that. So let's think about some practical productivity tips, which I learned from many other people. The wise sage, that is Ashton Kutcher, once said, starting the day with email is starting the day with everyone else's priority list. And I love that. By focusing on my own to-do list before looking at email has really helped me stay focused on my most important actions. And what I try to do is complete one of the tasks on my list before I even check my email, because then you can suddenly end up down a rabbit hole. You know, if your role is very sensitive to what's happening right now, that can be challenging, I get it, but just give it a try. It's also really good to think, and I mentioned this just now, about your energy. You know, are you aware of how your energy changes throughout the day? And you'll probably find that your energy is very different working at home than it was when you were going into an office environment. You know, I find I have really proactive, positive energy first thing in the morning and actually late at night. Like, I go on fire again about 10:30. I get a second wind about an hour or two after my kids go to bed. And this is when I do my most creative thinking. So generally, we have 3 different energy zones. We've got our super high energy, which is what I'm on right now, our sort of middling energy, and then our passive energy, our kind of zombie state where we can't really think about what we're doing. So I would recommend dividing your tasks up into those 3 different energy areas and think about what you're going to do in those different times. So the more difficult or tricky work, attribute that to the time when you've got the best energy. I also struggle to do really taxing work between about 3 and 5. I enter in a much more passive energy phase. So what I do is I save up tasks for when I don't need my creative or strategic brain, and then I don't beat myself up about it when I'm in this state, because I've reserved tasks for these times. And they're not always work tasks. It might be, oh, it's my, I've got to organize something for Sunday, and so I need to go online and Amazon. Or it might be that I'm doing a talk next week and I just need to do a bit of research, which is perhaps less taxing on my mind. And I think right now, so many people are working from home unexpectedly. You need to protect your quality, high energy time and prioritize those tasks you need to do. And then the other thing is, communicate those to other people. If you are living with people, what I have found very, very helpful over the last few years is I write it up on a whiteboard. So we put a whiteboard up in our kitchen, and I write on there, because I've worked from home for years now, I write on there what my non-negotiables are. And that way everyone in the morning can see that I am on do not disturb at that time, and I plan accordingly. And my husband does exactly the same thing. And even if you are living on your own, which I did for 10 years, up until 5 years ago when I met my husband, I still had the whiteboard, exactly the same one that I have up in my kitchen now. I used to have it up in my spare room in my flat, and I write up on there, what are the things that I must do today, and what are my non-negotiable do not disturb times? Because I find that physical seeing, that visible way of seeing it on a board is really helpful, and I find that it's very satisfying to tick things off. And that might be very personal for me, but I do find that having something that's very visible, like people have mood boards and things like visualization is really, really helpful. So I do find that the whiteboard system, or even just putting paper up on the wall, can be really, really helpful. I also learned this really cool productivity hack from somebody else, which has really helped me over the years, about the art of constraining. So this talks about, if I can only do 5 things today, what would they be? And you use a Post-it note, because this is a very good exercise for constraining, and it allows you to be really ruthless. So if you have to write these actions on a Post-it, you really need to narrow your field of vision about what you can achieve. So if I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed with the number of tasks that I need to do, and right now I'm finding that my time is much more limited, because we do have 3 other people in the household, when normally it would just be perhaps me and one other, I write those things down on a Post-it and I put it up. I actually stick it to my whiteboard, and then I can say, okay, success for me at the end of the day would be if I could just do these 5 things, and then I tick them off. And I find that extremely helpful. And be mindful about what's my attention going to be on today. Where am I going to place my energy? And I mentioned before about recharging. When I do take those breaks, rather than watching the news or consuming too much media, or going on Facebook and spending mindless time, or house party, which I've just discovered is quite fun as well, think about how you're going to use your break or rest time. And take those breaks. They are so important to recharge, and do something that is more mindful, a 10-minute meditation, read a book for 15 minutes, go for a walk around the block, do something that's going to drive the energy up during that time. So those are some of the things that I do, and from a ritual perspective. And then just some really practical tips that I've honed to stay focused is managing my physical workspace. Even if you don't have an office, which most of us don't, and it needs to be the kitchen table or a desk in the corner of a bedroom, think about where you're going to work and set up your workspace how you feel comfortable for the day. If you're at the kitchen table, I've heard of people saying that they sit in a different chair to the one that they eat their meals in, a bit like the coffee cup thing. Consider the ergonomics of your environment. Right now, we don't know how long we're going to be doing this for, and too many times I've fallen foul to an afternoon working on the sofa only to pay the price the next day of having a really sore back. So I don't do that anymore. Some people really like music. They've said to me they really enjoy music. Some people have said they really enjoy working with Good Morning Britain and the sound of some of the presenters in the background. It relaxes them. So whatever it is for you, find a place that's comfortable and supports your working needs. If you can, sit by a window. There has been a lot of research done into the importance of light on our well-being and mental health. And the variation of light is by far the most important factor in setting and maintaining our natural daily rhythms, our so-called circadian rhythms. And right now we are spending 80 to 90% of our time indoors. You know, and evidence suggests that low light exposure is associated with diminished health and well-being. It can lead to reduced sleep quality, depressed moods, lack of energy, poorer social interactions. So light is a really great way to keep focus. You know, somebody's put a question in the box that said they used to be very productive working from home pre-COVID, and now they're finding they're getting tired more easily. And I think it's that it could be a number of things, but I think having that clear divide between what's home, what's your environment like when you are working, what are you doing, are you taking regular breaks, do you have enough light, even on a grey day like today, do you have enough light? Because you can find that you just become fatigued all of the time. So doing some of these things might help with that. Try to avoid unnecessary distractions like Amazon deliveries. You know, there was a study that said that a 1-minute distraction takes 5 minutes to recover from. And now I'm finding I've got a lot less time in my day. I need to be really productive with it because my kids are going to be back and then I'm going to be on lunch duty or I've got to do something else. So put a note on your front door. You know, not that many people are arriving at the moment, you know, asking not to be disturbed or please don't even ring the doorbell. You know, put your package in a safe place. The other thing that I've talked about with this, you know, I talk about my whiteboard, but it doesn't have to be that, is display your work schedule to the people that you live with and be clear, you know, when you're working and when you're not. So even when you've got, you know, children around, you know when you can really take the distraction or not. Yeah, and remember that we're human. You know, things happen. People will probably be mortified if somebody comes in whilst they're on a work call, way more than you will be. And I have to say, I saw a hilarious video that's been circulated, and I feel very sorry for the guy that was in it, who was caught unawares, let's say, when a video call started and he wasn't really dressed appropriately, or perhaps wasn't really dressed at all. And we just need to be really compassionate. But if we can try and limit those things by communicating with people around us, and putting your work schedule out there, that's really helpful. Think about the relationship you have with your phone. Now, I worked at LinkedIn for many years, and we had a lot of very smart people in Silicon Valley and in other places around the world developing our mobile app to encourage you to use it more frequently. And it's very easy to get derailed by your phone. So there's loads of cool apps out there that can help you avoid that. There's one I really like called Forest, which is a paid for one. It's like $1.99 or something. And what you do is you set it for a period of time where, say, I'm going to do something in a half an hour chunk. I'm going to work for the next half an hour. And I know that I can get easily distracted by my phone. I open up Forest, and during that time, it grows a tree on my phone. And if I was to go and take my phone, the tree dies. And there's just something in mentally, subconsciously, that you don't want that tree to die. So that's a really cool thing to, you know, to maybe think about doing. Zoe's telling me that there's some nice tips and reflections coming in. So maybe we can just take a pause, because I would love to hear what you want to say on this before we just come on to the last point. Susie.
Yeah, thanks so much, Laura. So I've just had 3 really nice comments come in, which I thought you might want to hear. So someone says, at the Environment Agency, we're putting people first. Some of the things we're finding is that the amount of support information becomes overwhelming. People find staying connected on non-work issues is really important. There is guilt about lack of productivity or where they can see teammates being able to do more. So energy levels and self-awareness is key. And then someone said, not a question, but many people have said talking to co-workers casually on calls whilst working can help with focus and productivity.
Yeah, agree with that.
Yeah, and then this is nice. I attended a mental health call on Wednesday. The presenter suggested avoiding bedrooms as a workplace so that you won't associate it with needing to be aware, focused. It's important to have different spaces for a relaxing area, which I thought was quite
Yeah,
good.
I mean, I think on those last 2 points, like, well, on the bedroom one, yeah, I agree completely, but it's just not always possible. I had a call with one of my corporate kind of clients that I work with, and it was the European head of PR, very big job, and she's like, I'm working in my bedroom. I could see makeup brushes and all these things behind her. This is somebody that, has a very big job, but she said it's the only place I've got to work. So, we needs must, I suppose, at these times. And yeah, thank you. I've actually forgotten my train of thought on the other point, but yeah, thank you for sharing those points with us. Just on the last point on this slide was just about multitasking, and well, monotasking versus multitasking, which is another classic productivity tip to avoid distractions. It's very easy when you're working from home to start boiling pasta or folding the laundry or making a cup of tea whilst you're actually working. And again, I think it's really helpful to keep a good delineation between these different tasks. So, monotasking, or sometimes it's called single tasking, is the practice of dedicating yourself to a given task and minimizing potential interruptions until that task is complete. And there are so many different distractions at home. Sometimes I don't do this all of the time, but a lot of the time, if I find myself getting distracted by lots of things, I'll go, right, okay, monotask, let's just get on, complete this thing. I'll set my forest, and then I know that I've got a 25-minute chunk of time where I'm going to do absolutely nothing else but stay focused on this. So that was something that I thought might be helpful if people haven't tried that before. Okay. Moving on to what is particularly with the audience that we have on this call, and obviously this was a mental health conference, and I made change to your scheduled speaker, and we're talking about remote working. But one of the things that comes up very strongly is those feelings of being isolated when you're working from home. I've spoken to lots of people who are not necessarily single, some are not, but they live on their own, and they're bored, and they're watching a lot of the news, and they're feeling anxious, and they're not sure when this is going to end. And those feelings of isolation are very, common and sort of easy kind of traps to fall into. There is a real lack of interaction with the outside world. And when from a work perspective, you miss those overheard conversations in the office, those moments when you stay a bit late and you have that informal catch up with somebody at work, and they tell you about some of their social plans or whatever it is, or you've got that person that you often go to lunch with, and you have those like normal human non-work related conversations. I really miss those when I first started working from home full time. So I supplement them with other things. I have regular check-ins with people. I basically have tried to create those fake water cooler moments, which have really helped my own. Even though I live in a busy household, I still get those feelings, particularly from a work point of view, of feeling alone. And so I have regular check-ins with people that I work with, and with some people who I work with on a project more frequently, I have check-ins and check-outs. And I do those at the start and the end of a day, not every day, but some days, might be like 2 days a week, depending on the project. And they're 10 minutes to sort of set the scene for the day and then close it out. And Susie's heard me mention this before. I did a call last week for I'm involved in a charity which brings together charity leaders and business leaders in an environment of shared learning. And we've just started on a 1-year series of workshops. We've just had the first one in March, and then all of this happened. And so we all joined a call to check in with each other. And the founder of the charity did this thing at the beginning of the call where she basically made everybody go around on the call and say one word about how they're feeling. And I thought it was a bit odd originally. I was like, oh, okay, it feels a bit negative, and I'm not really sure. It felt a bit touchy-feely, and I wasn't sure. And a lot of the words that were coming out with those feelings of anxiety and uncertainty and concern. And then she documented those, and at the end of the call we carried on. We talked about all the kind of ways that we can help each other she did it again as the checkout, and we talked about, and we all had to go around and say one word how we feel at the end of the call. And it was amazing, the shift in the words that we're using categorically 100% across the board, you know, in terms of feeling supported and energized and this in it together feeling. And she created a word cloud and she sent it all round to us. And we had been able to move the needle quite considerably in terms of how we feel by doing this very quick exercise of the check in and check out at the end of the call. And I absolutely love that. And I've started using that moving forward. Other things that you can do is, you know, somebody said it in the comment, I think just then, about you're getting to know people, your colleagues, on a completely new level. You're literally seeing inside their houses a lot of the time. And we had somebody say on a call that we did the other day that they've never met more of their colleagues, husbands and wives, than they've ever done before. And I think that is one of the wonderful things that has come out of this terrible situation. You know, these are absolutely unprecedented times, and I think to embrace the unorthodoxy and the inventiveness that we can, you know, how innovative we can be with how we interact with each other is, you know, really a wonderful thing to come out of this. And so you can see other people that might be in their household, or look around their home and see what's hanging up on their wall behind them and ask them about it, and have some of those casual conversations that you might have had in the office, even over a video call. And obviously don't forget, you know, you can leave home, you can walk around the block, smile at your neighbours, you know, say hello as they're passing. All of those things make a huge difference to how you may be feeling. If somebody's come through on the chat and said that they have a team catch up each morning, and they start each day with what was the best thing about your day yesterday, and that they are saying helps people to stay positive and to find gratitude and happiness when there might not be much. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. I've also seen, as I said, you know, real innovation in how people are staying connected. You know, I've seen, you know, pizza parties, and, you know, people making their own pizzas. I'm not sure about ordering. Some people are into it right now and some not. But, you know, having food at the same time, having drinks at the end of the day at the same time. You know, a LinkedIn friend of mine was supposed to be on a team offsite now, which was supposed to end in a black tie event. Her team still had the black tie event. They still got dressed up in their finery and had a video call at the end of the day and had a drink as they would have done normally. There's an amazing professor of management at Northeastern University in Boston called Barbara Larson, who studies remote working, and she says, and I quote, "It's a good way to bond. It's kind of weird, but everyone's feeling weird, so it's fun." And she talks about this in it together mentality, which just adds a bit of levity and lightness to what is a very difficult environment. And I think the more effort you can put into communicating with your colleagues, the best chance you have of avoiding those feelings of isolation, which, you know, can lead to depression. So those are some of the things that I've heard about. I've also heard about people journaling, which is a huge movement, which is a great way to offload your feelings. My brother-in-law has been journaling for years and has been talking a lot to me about the power of journalism, journaling. You know, we're not alone. There's so many people out there trying the same sorts of things, trying new and inventive ways to avoid those kind of cabin fever feelings. You know, we're not alone. Other people are feeling the same way that we are. So let's try and use our time productively. Let's not sail through our breaks and our free time. Let's actually talk to people. Don't just DM them or text them. It's so important to hear a real voice right now. So that's some of the things that we've talked about in terms of, you know, isolation. Pulling it back into more of a work context. So those are kind of more general, but pulling it back into more kind of what you can do. I'm not going to go through all of these things because some of the things we've talked about already, but I think over communicating right now with your team and your manager are really important. You know, put yourselves in the shoes of your manager. You know, they are also going to be quite heavily thinking about how they can give reassurance about how the business is doing, about your team is doing, about how a project is going. and giving you the kind of reassurance that it's going to be okay. So over communicating with your team, whether it be your manager, your cross-functional partners, your colleagues, is also really important right now. And when you're on calls, I'm seeing people conducting calls in a very different way now. So I don't know about you, but I mean, I've done thousands upon thousands of video calls and webinar or WebExes and all these sorts of things over the years. And very rarely do I see people using the chat function, maybe to give some instructions and things like that, but it's not really something that I have found gets used all that much. But I think that now more than ever, when you've got lots of people on a call, using the chat function to allow people to make a point, to allow people to get involved is really, really helpful. And the other thing is, if you're conducting the call, if you can, make sure everybody gets their voice heard, because there are some people who naturally don't speak up and they don't push themselves to the front and may not get a word in. And so an ex-manager of mine at LinkedIn, he shared this with me, so it's working really well. It's just she goes around, and if she notices that somebody hasn't said anything, without calling them out, in a very nice and gentle way, she will ask them if there's, you know, a question, to get at least their voice heard on the call, so that person doesn't just disappear into the background. And I think that's a really, really nice way to make people feel heard and included at these times. So, Susie, can you do a time check for me? We are finishing.
Yes, it's 10 past. Yeah, so we might need to, sorry, speed up a little bit.
No,
Got so many great questions coming in, though. It's great.
Absolutely fine. So why don't we talk about movement and sleep? And somebody has already put a question in there about, you know, finding they're not having great sleep right now. So next slide, Susie. We are very limited right now with how we can go out, and we really need to look after ourselves. And for many of us, you know, we've lost our commute time. You know, for that for me was when I used to physically get out, get walking, get into the office. And, you know, for some people who do less physical activity, this is a great time just to form new habits, because it's very easy to become sedentary when you're working from home. So if you don't already have an exercise regime, just start slowly. Even, you know, a 10-minute walk around the block has its benefits. And don't forget to stand up and move around when you're at home. Now, in the office, you're walking between departments, you're going to get lunch, and at home, you have much less space to move around in. So make sure you do get up, walk around, do standing calls if you can. You don't need to be sat down the entire time. And don't forget those breaks. They are really good for your mental health. They are really good for helping you make good, fresh decisions. There's a load of research that's been done into decision fatigue and the quality of decisions that you make when you're tired or when you need a break. And not even that, but when you go into kind of a default stage, like when you're tired, you might be on a call and your natural default might be, let's talk about this on the next call. That's my natural default often. And taking breaks helps us to make good decisions. Also, sleep. Many people are saying that they're getting more sleep than normal, but it's not necessarily the best sleep. But at least they are getting more of it because haven't got to go anywhere. So, you know, they might have gone from 5 to 6 hours to 7 to 8, which is great. But in terms of getting good quality sleep, a couple of things are useful is to turn off those devices, you know, half an hour before you go to bed. You know, Arianna Huffington, I read this interview with her in 2017. She used to talk about tucking her phones into bed at night, quite literally in like a charging station. And I think that's actually really good advice. So switching off your phones so you are not distracted by those can get you into a much deeper sleep state. And also, I've become a massive fan of blue light blocking glasses. So I'm not always very good at practicing what I preach when it comes to my devices. I try really hard, but sometimes, you know, right at the 11th hour as I'm going to bed, I suddenly think, oh, I didn't do that thing or read that thing or order that thing, and I'm on my phone. But what I do now is I grab my computer glasses, and what they are great for is helping with digital eye strain, headaches, insomnia. You can buy them online, and they take away the glare from your phone. And there's different, you know, depending on whether you're a heavy user or a light user, there's different types of lenses, but I find they are really, really helpful. Mindfulness. I mean, this is why we're here. We're here to think about how we can be kind to ourselves, and stress reduction right now is important for us. And, you know, during this self-isolation phase, there are so many things that can peak our stress levels, particularly if we stop and think about some of the terrible things that are happening, you know, in the world. So I was introduced to meditation about 2 years ago when I was living in Thailand. And, you know, just taking 5 to 10 minutes out of your day to do a guided meditation, if you're new to this, you know, some breathing exercises can provide huge benefits and really lower the stress levels. And, you know, if you're a complete beginner like I was, there are loads of really good apps like Headspace and Calm and Insight Timer, and you know, lots of them are giving stuff away for free right now. I think Headspace have unlocked about 15 different meditations which you can do for free. That is a great way to reset and recharge how you're feeling. And also, you know, just taking 15 minutes, half an hour to do something that's purely for you, to nourish your soul, whatever it is that makes you happy, taking a bath, reading a book, cooking something, doing whatever it is, do something that's purely for you, is a great way to keep, you know, yourself well looked after. And finally, just another, you know, in connection with this, another trap in terms of looking after ourselves is how we can try and control what we're eating. You know, many people that have come up in previous sessions we've talked about is they find themselves gravitating towards the fridge. And, you know, I fell into this trap when I first started working from home. This Fresher 15, this concept, I don't know if you remember this, if you were ever at university, people used to talk about the Fresher 15, which is, you know, the 15 pounds that you put on in your first year of uni. You know, this was for me, was 20 years ago, but I definitely did that because I was eating quick, unhealthy food. So now I just try and keep my fridge stocked up. Even right now, you know, there's still ways to get loads of really good healthy food, with food that I can prepare a meal in like 3 to 4 minutes. You know, I always have a range of what I call deli bits in my fridge, and canned tuna and salad, where I can knock something together very, very quickly. And I try and follow this kind of meal plate, which is half veg, quarter carb and a quarter protein. And also, don't forget to drink. That was my biggest problem when I first started working from home, sort of really heavily, like full time, was I would get to the end of the day, find myself having a headache, think that it was because I'd spent so much time on the computer, but actually realise that I'd hardly drunk a thing since the first cup of tea I'd had in the morning. And so, you know, having a bottle, or, you know, reminding yourself that you need to keep drinking is really, really important. So that's kind of it. We're going to spend literally a couple of minutes now, if we just pivot to talking about what it's like working from home with a family. And if we had a bit more time, we probably, you know, maybe you can put in the comments whilst we're talking, like, do you have family? Do you have young children? Do you have older children? Do you have children who are not living with you, who are now suddenly returned home, might be at university or whatever, that, you know, your household is suddenly busier? And again, you know, I remember this amazing interview that went viral on the BBC. You know, so many of us related to that. You know, how, you know, working with kids around, you know, is a very unusual time for all of us, very unprecedented time. And so we need to just experiment and accept the unorthodoxy that goes with us, and be passionate, compassionate about the fact that, you know, we're human and we do get interruptions. And as I said earlier, the person being interrupted will be more mortified than probably anybody else on that call. So we can do all the, you know, things we've talked about to try and minimize that wherever we possibly can. You know, one of the beautiful things that's going to come out of this is, you know, maybe for some of us, this is an opportunity to redefine how we work and live. Maybe businesses are going to change the way that they think about people home working. But what I would say is, think about when your energy is high, when it's in the middle, and when it's low. And, you know, family first. At the end of the day, if your child is screaming and you need to go to them, please go to them. You know, there's nothing worse than thinking, I'm on this call, I can't go, and there's been an accident. Some of the practical tips that I have found helpful is splitting the day in half. So half a day, and then if somebody else is there to help with the children, the other half a day, a partner or somebody, or even just alternating, you know, 1 hour on, 1 hour off with the kids. Sometimes, you know, when my husband and I's schedules are very back to back, that's how we have to work. And plan the schooling, plan the snacks, plan the meals. I get out at the beginning of the day what the snacks are going to be for the day. They can dip in, dip out, but it's all very, very well planned. I also have a list, which I've got young kids, 2 and 4, of a myriad of different activities that they can do. Because sometimes when you're busy, you can have that brain freeze when you're like, oh my God, what am I going to do with them for the next half an hour? So I have a list on my board of just things that they can do: make hats, paint a rock, do something in the garden, go on the swing. So I literally just cycle through those, and you can apply the same thing if you have older children as well. And you know, the traffic light system I've heard of works for some people, doesn't work for me, but I've heard of other people finding that a traffic light system is really helpful. And how that works is that, you know, the person that's working puts a red, yellow or green circle on the office door, or, you know, on the door of the room where they're working. And then obviously green means to come right in, yellow means to ask first, and red means do not disturb. You know, it makes productivity a kind of a game for the kids in a very, you know, visual and easy to understand way. As I said, didn't work for me. My children completely ignored it. But for some people, they've told me about this. They're finding that works really well. Somebody also told Susie and I yesterday how they put a teddy bear outside the door of where they're working. And if the teddy bear's there, it means don't come in. So they can sit and play with the teddy. And for them, that worked really well. Again, I think my children would probably just go straight past that. And there's also lots of stuff online about surviving working from home as a couple. And there's a professor of a university in London, and I can never pronounce her surname. It's Jennifer Petrigleri, and she has written, she's created a series which is going to be on LinkedIn and YouTube called the Survival Series, about couples that work. Because again, that's a whole other dimension of working at home with families that we never really kind of faced before. So just in terms of some closing thoughts, Susie, if you could just move the slide on once or twice. You know, there are many hidden benefits of remote working. You know, we're going to come out of this hopefully with some new ideas about how we can make this work. So let's embrace the unorthodox. You know, for many people, you've got more time back in your day. So think about how you use that wisely. I'm finding the day still flies past, but I'm trying to use my 10 minutes, half an hour that I get more productively. You know, have those daily rituals, but be open to being flexible. Stroke your pets, play with your kids. You know, this is an unusual time that you can close your laptop and be playing with them, you know, within minutes, and get to know your colleagues, you know, on a different level. And finally, again, you know, be kind to yourself, be kind to others. So it's 25 past. We've got 5 more minutes. If anybody has any thoughts or questions they'd like to share in the chat, Susie will have a look at those. I'd love your input.
Oh, thanks so much, Laura. Yeah, so it's made me laugh that apparently 3 people have already downloaded Forest and are watching their tree grow, which is nice, isn't it?
Brilliant.
Whilst you on your phone. Someone said, which I thought was nice, that their MD has asked us not to hide children or pets, which I think's really nice. And then someone said that they're introducing their children on calls. They let them say hello, and then that seems to stop them charging in because it takes the mystery away, which I thought seemed quite sensible too.
Yeah.
Okay, here's a question. How do you cope when your partner is furloughed, so you're the only one working from home, but have someone by your side who is effectively not working?
Yeah, that's a real challenge. I can imagine that must be very difficult, because depending on how they feel about being furloughed, some people I know have actually welcomed the opportunity to be furloughed, whilst others have been, you know, very disappointed and it's really affected them. So, you know, that is one thing. But I suppose what all you can do is try and focus on the positives, and try perhaps share some of the things that you would normally do in your home, and to share those tasks, and perhaps to try and use the time that your partner's got to maybe give something back. I had a wonderful conversation with a man a couple of days ago who's found himself out of assignment. He's a very, very smart guy. He's a technology consultant. And we just talked about him maybe giving some of his time back to charities, or to, you know, other people that might be able to use his skills, because otherwise he's staring, you know, possibly down the barrel of 3 to 6 months without having any paid for work, but he still wants to be useful. So I think, you know, having something, even if it's not work related, even if it's something in the home, you know, a DIY task or something that you try and remain busy, to set yourself some goals, even using that post-it note technique of put 5 things on there that you want to achieve, could be helpful for your furloughed partner.
Thanks. Just say, a few of you asked me to sort of go back a slide and sort of catch some of the information which they might have missed. Just to reiterate, you will receive this whole webinar tomorrow by email, so it might be easier because of timing now just to do that. Right, so someone said, this is a good question, should people still take annual leave just to recharge even if you cannot go anywhere?
Well, that's an interesting question, and actually might be a question that's taken out of your hands. It's probably a conversation that you might want to have with your employer. I have heard of businesses who are enforcing annual leave right now, because they don't want, you know, they know that they're going to be extremely busy when we come out of the other side of this, which we will, and they can't really be in a position to have lots of people taking time off. So number one, I would say, don't spend too much time thinking about it, because it could be that that decision is taken out of your hands. And unfortunately, right now, as from an employer's point of view, needs must. But secondly, if an employer doesn't have a position on that, and you are able to take some time off, absolutely do. I'm even feeling myself that at the moment I'm working a lot, that I need just a clear day when I'm not going to do any work, and I can devote myself to just the other things in my life, me, my husband, my children, etc. So I think it's still important, if you can, to have a clear day when you're not going to be working, and if you need that time, if you feel like mentally that you need to take that time and you're able to, then do.
Yeah, so we've had a few, thank you, we've had a few people saying that their employers are enforcing annual leave. So yeah, it's you know, and that people are, you know, dropping from 5 days to 4. Quite a few of my friends are doing that as well. So then to try and take your day off together so you can, you know, not be working at the same time.
Yeah.
Oh, look, that's nice. Someone said they've set up a scheme where we can donate leave and apply to have extra days. There you go. Lots of yeah, so we've had loads of amazing comments, Laura, and saying how some really, really good tips. So I'd just like to say, everyone, thank you so much for bearing with us and for being so interactive. You've been an absolutely fantastic audience. I've been, you know, there's just been questions and comments coming in throughout today, so that is great. And just to say, the next webinar in This Can Happen series is on the 7th of April with Sarah Steele on COVID-19 curing your finances. So if you're interested, that's coming up next. Yeah, so I keep saying this, but you will be receiving this tomorrow by email. So please don't worry if you missed anything. If you would just take a minute, on your screen will pop up a really brief questionnaire. If you wouldn't mind just filling that in, that's really, really useful for us going forward in terms of content for future webinars. And I'd just like to thank Laura very much for this really great session, and I hope the rest of you all have a fabulous day. I'm now going to end the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.